Hey guys, my name's Jack Marsho. I run Destructible Cow Photo and Film, and this isn't something I'd usually do, but I thought it might be a little bit of fun. So I get a lot of people asking me how I go about scanning my negative photos once I get them back from the shop, and I always go on about how I don't take them to the shop to actually develop them onto a disc or into glossy photos because it limits the amount that you can actually edit the photos in post. Now, of course, if you shoot 35mm film, you're going to have to make a couple of sacrifices when it comes to the versatility of editing your photos in post because it's such a permanent format, but that doesn't mean you have to get someone to squish them down to JPEGs in the store and then you won't be able to do a single thing with them. What I'm going to show you to do is how to scan these with your digital camera and then shoot that raw, bring that into Lightroom, and I'll show you my photo editing process in Lightroom so you can edit your film in RAW. So today I will be editing and scanning some of the photos that I took on my Canon FTB of Columbus at Foundry Studios in Brisbane. So let's get started with that. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do when you are setting up what you're actually going to be projecting the film onto is a really light background. What I've got here is, I'm just using my reflector, the white side of my reflector, and that seems to do the job. You can just use a white wall if you want. I did that before I actually got my reflector. Anything really works. Lighting, you don't need anything particularly fancy. I've got a 500 watt work light. I've got a 250 watt work light there. I was going to do two 500 watt work lights, but I used two different heads for that side, and they both exploded, and I've never done that before. I've never broken a work light head in my life, but it's just today I broke two of them. I'm getting a red head kit soon, 3 red heads. That'll be nicer because there's a built-in dimmer. You can choose exactly how bright you want everything to be, but this is going to do the job perfectly, I think. Okay, so for this project we're going to be using the Canon 7D to scan the film. And for lenses, you might laugh at me for this, but I'm actually just going to use the kit lens, the 18 to 55. This is literally the only thing I use this lens for. I have much better lenses, like I have a couple primes and I have some A-series zooms, but this honestly just does a great job for this specific task, so that's what we're going to be using for this. However, I do have this macro adapter, so let's just see if it works on my phone. If we go right up close to something, see how that works? So if I take it off, it's that, and it just focuses really close onto certain objects. So that's what we're going to be using on top of that. It runs about $15, these little macro adapters, or you could use your own macro lens if you do have that. So that's what we're going to throw on at the moment. So here we have one of the strips of film that I will be scanning today. You can tell which way the film is supposed to go if you're still used to it just by the numbers on the top and the writing. It'll actually say, well, if it's around like that and you can't read it, it's the wrong way around. So just flip it around. There's that. That's pretty much basic information. But yeah, so this is what the film looks like. Basically what you're going to want to do is just place it down on the opposite end of the way it's supposed to go, and just throw some blue tack on the other end. Okay, so now you have your strip of film, and it's got the bits of blue tack on top, and you'll see here in front of the camera I have a little mic stand set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the blue tack on top of that to the top of the mic stand, like this. Okay, so you see that? I just kind of hung it along there. I kind of draped it along the mic stand. If you just unscrew that, you can just progress which shot you're actually using. So I'll start back here chronologically, and then you can just kind of move your way through, and that's how I hold it. It's a lot easier than actually holding the film on top, because then you might get a bit of motion blur. It takes a lot of time to do that. That's what I did for a fair while, but then they upgraded to this, so you can use a slower shutter speed. You can stop down your ISO to avoid any bokeh. See how this is kind of curved a little bit? If you stop down your aperture and shoot at, say, I don't know, f8 or f12, then obviously that'll decrease the amount of bokeh in your image from the 7D, and you won't have, say, the left half of the image in the focus and the right half of the image completely blown out. Okay, so we have everything set up, ready to go. Now we're going to talk about camera settings for this. So, these incandescent lights, they burn around 3200. So what you're going to want to do is set your actual camera to a custom Kelvin color temperature. If your camera can't do that, say if you only have a 550D or something like that, you can just set it to the tungsten light. But I do have the custom Kelvin, so I set it to 32, and if you look here, there's still a little bit of the sepia kind of seeping through there. So what I'm going to do is change that back to be pretty much as cold as you can get it, which I think on the 7D is, I think it's like 2500. So you look at that, and it's pretty much straight gray rather than having any sepia undertones. But you don't really have to worry about that if you're shooting RAW, because the really, like, one of the most beautiful things about RAW is you can actually change the color temperature at any point. Also, I thought I'd throw this in. If you're not shooting RAW, I'd probably turn this video off right away, because if you're shooting JPEG, if you don't have the camera to shoot RAW, or you don't have the software to edit RAW files, then there's literally no use of scanning your own film. I'd say you'd have a better chance of getting better photos if you just take it to the store, ask them to put it on a disc, and come back when you have a proper DSLR that can shoot RAW. So obviously, if you come around and press the shutter button manually, you're going to get a bit of camera shake, which obviously isn't going to be good, because I'll show you the settings that I'm working with at the moment. Okay. So I'm on 1/8 of a shutter speed. I'm on f13 shooting at ISO 500. So 1/8 is a very slow shutter speed, so I'm going to get a lot of motion blur if I actually press the shutter speed manually with my hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my drive mode to the 2-second timer. So that's that there. So if I go back into my live view, I use my live view to focus. Don't use your viewfinder to focus, because it doesn't particularly do the trick. So you just focus on, just try and get the sharpest image out of the film. Come back. So just shutter. There you go, you've scanned your first negative from this roll. And I'm just going to scan, I've got 2 rolls here. 2 24 packs of Kodak color. I've got that one there as well. So I'm just going to shoot all the rolls now, and I'll come back after that and I'll show you what I'm doing in post. Okay, so I'm done shooting. I've brought all my CR2 files back into Lightroom now. I've got 46 photos, which means there were 2 photos that I didn't think were worth the effort of editing and focusing onto the film and all that kind of thing, but I got 46 of them. You'll notice that the top half is different, because I shot the first half on tour, and then second half of the first and the entire second roll with Columbus. So that's why these ones look different. So let's just head straight into the development of the photos. Now, I had to sift through them. One of my favorite photos from the entire batch was number 40. So first thing I'm going to do is change the RGB from the incline to a decline. So bring the left all the way up, bring the right all the way down. Now, there's that. So you'll see that I tried to shoot as cold as possible, not as possible, but as cold as I thought would be necessary, which was 2550, and clearly it's not, because it's still very blue. So I'm going to bring it back down to 2000, which is the absolute coldest you can get, which is that magic of Lightroom that I was telling you about earlier. Now, something that confused me when I started to do this process was the fact that everything's backwards. If you drag the exposure down, the exposure increases because it's negative, and the same thing with the HSL in this program. Say if you want to adjust the luminance of the blues, say if you want to adjust the luminance or the saturation of the reds. So you drag the saturation of the reds up, and it drags the saturation of the blues up. Say if you want to drag the reds, make them brighter. Let's do that, and it makes the blues darker. You see that? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then once you consider it, because you're editing the negative photo, you haven't actually rendered. Just because you've moved the tone curve doesn't mean you've actually rendered a whole new negative rasterized image. So let's reset this exposure back down there. But yeah, we're going to bring the exposure back up, and I'm also going to press R for the resize tool. I'm going to bring that back down, just so I cut out the extra film on the bottom and the photos on the left and the right of frame. So, press enter. That's the photo that I was seeing through the viewfinder. That was my creative direction. Not much of a creative direction, a bit too much headspace, but a nice rule of thirds photo. And, okay, let's begin. I'm going to drag the contrast up a little bit, and I'm going to make a little clip in my tone curve, and I'm going to just add a little more contrast and just play around with the basic module here just to try and get the best little photo you can get. The main thing is just trying to really max out your contrast with these, because if you shoot against a white background like I was, it'll wash out the image a fair bit, as you saw with the raw photo. And saturation, I think we can do it with a little bit more, but we'll change the color now. And there's a fair bit of green bleeding that you get with film, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Everything's a little too warm now, so I'm going to adjust the red and bring that back down there. Also, you'll notice that it's inclining with the red, green and blue, but if you change the RGB, it changes that exclusively. So the red, green and the blue tone curve stays exactly the same. So there's that. I don't know whether I want to go for a cold or a warm feeling with this one. I think I'm going to go cold, just because it feels, it's a sweaty kind of feeling image otherwise. And saturation, I'm going to bring the luminance of the blue down, which increases the luminance of the oranges, and the reds up, which is the facial tones. And I'm feeling we can probably get rid of a little more of those green overtones, something like that. Just really kind of nitpick it, but I'm thinking this looks pretty good as it is. The only thing I can change is this around here is a little bright, so I'm going to get my adjustment brush. I'm just going to set it to an extra 0.7 more exposure, which is less exposure, and just kind of get rid of the exposure from the left hand side there. And that's a little too extreme, you can tell that's been touched digitally, so I'm just going to do that. I think, yeah, just a 0.23 of a stop is enough to kind of fix that one up, and I think that looks pretty good. So just to reiterate, I'm just going to do another one, just for another kind of example. So I throw on my negative preset there. I'm going to crop it down, as I always do, to get rid of the extra film on the side. This is a photo from tour with Bergie reading some titty mags, and I feel like we'll be able to turn this smutty boy into a beautiful piece of art. So I'm going to go into photo, I'm going to rotate it left, and I'm going to switch it back to 2000 because it's from the same scanning session as the other one. So usually if you adjust the immediate changes like I just did then, you can usually just apply that, set it as a preset, apply it to all of them, and it should turn out about the same, so you won't have to do that every single time. Okay, exposure-wise, I exposed this absolutely beautifully. I think I did a really good job at exposing this in the camera. So really all we've got to do is maybe just add a little bit more contrast, just expose it the tiniest bit more. Yeah, add some contrast on my tone curve, and just kind of work in the basic module to kind of max out the contrast there. And now we're ready to work on color, which is fair bit easy. So not a whole lot of green spill here, it's mainly just blue, so I'm going to drag the blue back down, and once you get rid of the blue, that's when the green starts coming in. So then I'm going to drag away the green, and now it's kind of a boring flat image. It didn't look like this in real life. I want to replicate that. So I'm going to bring back the reds and bring back a couple of the blue. I'll get rid of a few more blues. So what I'm thinking of is if you took this roll to a store and say, hey, can you just put this onto a disc or USB or some glossy photos, this is what you get back. You wouldn't have any creative control over the coloring of the photo. You'd have the raw film look, which is great. It's a cool look, but sometimes you do want to change some of the stuff. Let's say that I shot this for a magazine or something, and let's say that I decided, actually, this would look a lot better as a twilight shot. Let's say Penthouse wanted to kind of work on their little creepy effect. So let's bring back the blues. We turn that back down, go back to our RGB curve, take away some of the contrast, and take away some of that red, because that's intruding a fair bit. Let's say you wanted to do that. Let's say that's the final image that you wanted to do that. You probably wouldn't have a whole lot of chance, or it wouldn't look as good if you got that back as a JPEG, or if you scanned just the straight up photo that they put onto a glossy paper. So what I'm saying is the magic of RAW also saves you a fair bit of money. When you're spending $10 on a roll of film and then you get another $10 to get it developed into negatives, it can be an extra $5 to $10 to get it scanned onto whatever medium you want, depending on what medium you do want. And then from there, it really, it can cost you up to $30 to get a 24 roll of film to become a photo, which is a hell of a lot if you're not getting paid for the job. I didn't get paid for any of these photos. I just do it because I really like shooting film. For a paid job, I usually use my 7D unless the artist requests otherwise, or I'll bring it up and say, hey, I want to shoot film, it looks cool. They might say yes, they might say no. I think it looks really good, and that's how I do it. So there's another tutorial for digital grading coming your way pretty soon, and hopefully you'll be there for that. I'll put my business Facebook page down below so you can check out some of the music videos I've directed. You can check out this entire set of photos that I will put up later on tonight, and hopefully you enjoyed the tutorial. Thank you very much.